In the news tonight, His Majesty the King summons Parliament to meet in an extraordinary session on Sunday. The King is back home after talks in the United Arab Emirates on bilateral and regional issues. And Syria's opposition leader says he's ready to talk with Bashar al-Assad's government as the conflict continues. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. A royal decree has summoned the 17th Parliament to convene in an extraordinary session as of next Sunday. It came 12 days after parliamentary elections that brought in a new 150-member lower house. The House has seen the formation of blocs and alliances, as well as intense lobbying for the post of Speaker and members of the various committees. In a sharp contrast with previous two-horse speakership races, 10 MPs are now vying for the top job, making a choice hard to call. Among the frontrunners are former Speaker Abdel Karim al-Dughmi and Saad Hail al-Srour. In interviews with Jordan Television, MPs said the House's top priorities are forging ahead with political and economic reform, amending the House's internal laws, fighting corruption, and revisiting legislation directly affecting citizens' life. His Majesty the King is back home, concluding a working visit to the United Arab Emirates and talks with the United Arab Emirates President Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan. The King and accompanying delegation also visited the tomb of the late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan and recited verses from the Holy Quran. King Abdullah was seen off by the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi and Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan and other senior UAE officials. Yesterday, King Abdullah and UAE President Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan discussed Jordanian-UAE ties and regional and international issues, including Syria. The two leaders hailed relations between the two countries and expressed their commitment to enhancing cooperation. The two leaders said closer cooperation among Arab countries is needed to protect strategic Arab interests and agreed to continue coordination to boost joint Arab action. Also high on the talks were the Middle East peace process and finding a solution to the Syrian crisis to end the suffering of its people. King Abdullah briefed the UAE leader on Jordan's relief efforts to Syrian refugees, noting that the United Arab Emirates had deployed a field hospital to the Zaatari refugee camp. The two leaders discussed means to bring about a just and comprehensive peace to the Middle East and achieve the legitimate rights of Palestinians. The two-state solution, they stressed, is the only means to bring about security and stability in the region. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour opened World Interfaith Harmony Week, organized by the Ministry of Awqaf and Islamic Affairs at the King Abdullah First Mosque. The UN General Assembly has adopted World Interfaith Week, launched by His Majesty the King in 2010, reflecting Jordan's advocacy of dialogue and coexistence. Minister of Awqaf and Islamic Affairs Abdul Salam Al-Abbadi told the ceremony that the King's call was a gift to humanity through this initiative, which was explained by His Royal Highness Prince Ghazi bin Mohammed in an address to the Assembly. He said World Interfaith Week is an occasion for people to promote religious teachings of tolerance, peace, and respect for others. His Majesty Queen Rania visited the Elderly Home Care Center at Al-Asirra Al-Bayda Society and met with volunteers from the Jordan Volunteers Group who provide psychological, social and medical services to the elderly. Queen Rania toured the home care and checked on its clinic and medical services it provides and chatted with some of the guests. She also checked on handicrafts made by some of the guests and listened to how this experience has helped them regain their confidence, especially that some of their pieces were sold at bazaars. She also listened to a briefing from volunteers on initiatives and programs they have started, such as Give Us a Chance, which aims at investing in the elders' skills to produce different handicrafts. The Queen pointed out the importance of voluntary work that not just benefits the elderly, but also other members of the society, as well as the volunteers themselves. The Jordan Volunteers Group has 15,000 volunteers, most of whom are university students, and were able to reach beneficiaries in 9 governorates across the kingdom. Up to 2,148 Syrians have crossed into the kingdom the past 20 hours. A source at the Jordan Armed Forces General Command said the refugees included children, women and old people. Many injured and sick people were also among the displaced people who were evacuated to an area designated by the armed forces. The new arrivals have raised to about 60,000 the number of refugees who have crossed to the kingdom this month. Syrian opposition leader Mu'ad al-Khatib said he would accept negotiations with President Bashar al-Assad deputy on the principle of the regime's departure. Speaking after meeting Iranian, Russian and US officials in Germany, Khatib asked Iran to deliver his negotiations offer to Assad's government. In Syria, government forces rained shells across the capital, Damascus, as they exchanged fire with rebel fighters. The latest video images showed plumes of smoke rising from a residential area in Douma and Kafar Batna in rural Damascus. Rebels also said they had shot down a fighter jet belonging to the country's air force near the city of Hama. Israeli troops arrested 23 Hamas members in the occupied West Bank. Hamas said a total of 25 Palestinians were arrested. 23 of them belong to the Islamic group, including 3 lawmakers. An Israeli military spokeswoman did not say why they had been detained. US Vice President Joe Biden held talks with French President François Hollande in Paris. They discussed the situation in Mali, Iran, and the Syrian crisis. Biden commended France's actions in Mali to oust al-Qaeda militants, saying it was not only in the interest of France, but also the United States and the world. On Syria, Hollande expressed regret that matters were getting worse, saying France was doing its utmost for a transitional solution. Biden and Hollande said they were taking a tough stance on Iran.
Complimented the president and his predecessor on the strong stand that France has taken to make it clear to Iran that we mean business.
Nous constatons que la situation se dégrade.
We regret that despite every effort, Iran is still refusing transparency and to satisfy its international obligations. We have arranged another meeting which must take place soon so that more negotiations can happen, and we are putting on maximum pressure for negotiations to get somewhere.
Over to Iraq, a suicide bomber attacked a government-backed militia north of Baghdad, killing at least 22 people and injuring over 40. The stepped-up bombings came as Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki is struggling to end mass protests by Sunni Muslims. Police said the bomber had infiltrated a meeting of the Sahwa tribal fighters and detonated his explosives as they were gathering to pick up salaries in Taj town north of the capital. The 7th suicide bombing in a month was part of a surge in violence in a country where Shiite, Sunni and ethnic Kurdish factions still struggle over how to share power. No group claimed responsibility for the attack, but an al-Qaeda affiliate has vowed to take back ground lost to American and US forces and urged Iraqi Sunnis to rise up against Maliki's government. The Israeli occupation of Jerusalem and Syria are top of a host of issues that will be tackled by a pan-Islamic summit in Cairo this week. Other topics include strengthening economic and political cooperation among Organization for Islamic Cooperation members and ways to curb anti-religious acts. Khaled Dababne has more on the summit's preparations.
Egypt pushes for a Middle East free of weapons of mass destruction. Its Foreign Minister Mohammed Kamel Amr told colleagues meeting in Cairo to prepare for an Islamic summit that the gathering should be an opportunity for talks on removing nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction from the region. The Organization for Islamic Cooperation Summit, due to open on Wednesday, will see Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad leading the Iranian delegation in the first visit of an Iranian president to Egypt since 1979.
This summit is considered a renewed opportunity for us to stress on the overwhelming priority for which we plan a special conference to remove nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction from the Middle East.
Syria's membership of the OIC was suspended at the OIC's last summit despite strong Iranian objections. The civil war in Syria is likely to be one of the main issues discussed at the summit. On other issues, Secretary General of the Pan-Islamic Organization, Ikmaluddin Ihsanoglu, added his support to the military intervention in Mali and the continuing fight to reclaim lands captured by armed groups.
The situation in Mali and the entire African coast is a source of worry for all of us, and one which affects peace and stability in the whole region. And on this front, we would like to repeat our solidarity with the National Transitional Government in Mali and its efforts to quickly reclaim the areas which have been taken over by the armed groups. We also support its mission to reclaim national unity and peace on its land.
The OIC chief also stressed the need for a modern approach to fighting extremism and eliminating the violent exploitation of religion. The summit will be the biggest international event Egypt's President Mohamed Morsi has hosted since taking power 7 months ago. Khaled Dababne for the news at 10.
Afghan President Hamid Karzai and his Pakistani counterpart Asif Ali Zardari vowed to reach a peace settlement in Afghanistan within 6 months. He spoke at a meeting in London hosted by British Prime Minister David Cameron. Cameron urged Taliban to engage in talks as he spoke of progress during the talks that focused on peace in Afghanistan and enhanced cooperation with Pakistan. Laith Shanqiti has the details.
An Afghan conference opened with an appeal for the Taliban to enter peace talks on the future of the war-torn country. The talks host British Prime Minister David Cameron made the plea as he brought together Afghan President Hamid Karzai and Pakistani President Asif Ali Zardari. Cameron said London supports a plan to open an office for talks between the Taliban and the Afghan High Peace Council in Qatar's capital, Doha.
Our discussions today have focused on 2 important issues: the Afghan-led peace process and strengthened cooperation between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And we've made progress on both these issues. We all fully support an Afghan-led peace process and the opening of an office in Doha for negotiations between the Taliban and the High Peace Council. This should lead to a future in which all Afghans can participate peacefully in that country's political processes.
Karzai supported Cameron's appeal to the Taliban and expressed hope the group would join the peace process to build the country.
I'm glad to note today, Mr. Prime Minister, that we have made progress. I endorse your remarks on the peace process and on the deeper relationship between us and Pakistan, and very much hope that all that we discussed today and the subsequent agreements that we made will be put into action to the satisfaction of all sides.
The Pakistani president said Islamabad would fully support any dialogue with the Taliban.
Pakistan endorses the concept, it's the world peace agenda, to have a dialogue with the Taliban. We will support it, we will help it, and hopefully come out of this to a war which has been very damaging for both our nations.
The meeting was aimed at discussing peace talks and improving ties between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and was also expected to focus on how to tackle security threats after international troops leave Afghanistan in 2014. Britain will withdraw nearly half its troops from Afghanistan by the end of the year as part of a security handover to Afghan forces more than a decade after the US-led invasion. Laith Shanqiti for the news at 10.
And over to the United Kingdom. In one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of recent times, a team of scientists from the University of Leicester said a skeleton entombed under a car park found last year is that of English King Richard III.
Indeed, Richard III, the last Plantagenet King of England.
And in our sports outlook, the Baltimore Ravens were crowned Super Bowl champions after beating the San Francisco 49ers 34-31. It was a wild and entertaining match as the Ravens survived a furious second-half rally by the 49ers and a momentum-sapping power outage. A Super Bowl record 180-yard kick-off return for a touchdown by Jacoby Jones to open the second half gave the Ravens a 28-6 lead. But the 49ers scored 17 straight points after a 35-minute power outage and nearly pulled off a stunning comeback. Ravens' Joe Flacco was the game's most valuable player. And in cycling, BMC Racing won the second stage of the Tour of Qatar. BMC clocked 16 minutes and 7 seconds in the 14-kilometer team time trial at Al-Rufa to the west of Doha. The result saw BMC's Brent Bookwalter retain the leader's golden jersey. In second place came Britain's Team Sky and Omega Pharma in third. The tour finishes in Doha on Sunday. And finally, a look at the weather forecast. A cold night with 4 Celsius in Amman and moderate winds. Temperatures will slightly rise tomorrow with warm conditions across the kingdom. Winds will be moderate, picking up at times and blowing dust in the desert areas. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect a cold night and a relatively warm day tomorrow with light winds and calm seas. Here's now a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here's a recap of our top stories. His Majesty the King summons Parliament to meet in an extraordinary session on Sunday. The King is back home after talks in the United Arab Emirates on bilateral and regional issues. And Syria's opposition leader says he's ready to talk with Bashar al-Assad's government as the conflict continues. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I am Raad Lapush. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.